Good morning, world. This is Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition. And on World Edition, we bring you great news from around the world, talk about innovation, and discuss with our panelists and our viewing audience around the world what we can do to build back better and stronger during and after this COVID pandemic. Today, as I wear my Team USA hat, I'm excited to continue to cheer on all of the great athletes around the world on the Olympics. We'll be talking a little bit about the Olympics today. But I want to begin my commentary today on something that's been talked about recently, booster shots. Recently, during this pandemic, we are seeing richer, more developed countries like Germany, France, Russia, even Hungary, say that they're going to start giving booster shots to their vulnerable populations, third shot of the COVID-19, in most cases, the Pfizer shot. Now, Britain has indicated that they're going to provide 60 million additional doses for their vulnerable populations. And all of this is occurring while billions around our planet haven't even received their first dose. We've seen the Delta variant as it continues to spread, spike in India, Vietnam, the African nations, Nepal, all over the world. So that's the question we need to ask ourselves. Is it necessary to vaccinate those who have already been vaccinated versus not vaccinating the billions around the world who haven't received the first shot? Now, there's a couple of points I want to make today before we begin our discussion. First, the science and data shows that the mRNA vaccines are long-lasting and highly efficient in reducing deaths and hospitalizations. There is no guarantee that it will reduce infections, but even if you got the COVID vaccine through a breakthrough virus or a Delta variant case, you most likely will be okay. Only 3 to 5% in the United States are immunocompromised. And President Biden has not really indicated whether he would allow his administration to give booster shots. He said he's open to it, but there's been no clear direction from the government of the United States. Right now, their focus is on the vaccinated, the unvaccinated, which Dr. Fauci claims that 90% of those that are hospitalized are unvaccinated, which is clearly a priority of the United States of America to get those unvaccinated vaccinated. Even there's much vaccine skepticism out there at the moment. My second point is profits. We are in a free market capitalist society. Is it the case that these pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer know that they can go to richer countries like the United States, like the European Union, where they've actually increased prices to sell more vaccine because they can make more sales, and more sales mean more revenue, and more revenue means more profit? I hate to think that way, but it is something that we need to talk about. My final take on this, before we open it up, is I really believe that shots should just clearly go to the unvaccinated in our nation and world, the people in our poor countries, the people all around the world. Because rather than just giving booster shots to those who are most likely unlikely to die from the pandemic or get extremely sick from the pandemic, wouldn't it be better to put these vaccines, those focus on those first shots and second shots, to make sure that we can rid the world of this virus and reduce any chances of additional variants coming up? My analogy of the day is this pandemic is more than a monster, it's a hydra. Cut off one head and two heads will grow in its place. In this case, the heads are the variants, and we've got to make sure that this hydra doesn't keep growing more heads. We'll be discussing this today on World Edition. And with us today, we have from Down Under, Shaquille Latimer. We have Mark Lee, my co-host, and our boss, Nick Paladiva. Welcome to the show. Hail Hydra.
He ain't my boss. Let me just say that.
You also forgot Sasha Starr. We cannot forget the legendary chess person, Sasha Starr, who is also with us as well. And of course, like you said, we do have Nick here as well, but we cannot forget Sasha. I was about to be late. We can't forget his name.
I've got to get into this. I've got to get into these comments by Steve Rao. Firstly, I'll just start with the one that's not that controversial. Steve, I don't think there's scientific evidence that the vaccines are long lasting, because they haven't been around long enough, and Pfizer and other group, Moderna and all that, have said that they can only really say it'll last for about 6 months, maybe less, before efficacy drops off. That's why they need to look at booster shots and that sort of thing. But back to the main point that you made. which essentially, if I'm reading it correctly, is it fair that wealthy countries will give their people a third shot when all these people go without? Which is like, is it fair that there's billionaires when there are these people who are poor? Is it fair? Like, what are these countries supposed to do? Germany's supposed to go, look, it'd be safe if you get the third shot. It'll give you more, more protection against the variant. So what we're going to do is we're going to use your tax dollars to buy the vaccine and give it to somebody else. Like I know you guys love socialism and all that, but like, really? And your point about Pfizer and the drug companies targeting rich countries in order to try to maximize their profits. If that were true, Australia wouldn't be sitting here still waiting for the vaccine, because last time I checked, we're a wealthy country.
Yes, sorry guys, I chimed out for a minute. We're having some Wi-Fi issues, but anyway,
Nick is muted, so he can't hear whatever rubbish.
So anyway, I'm gonna. So thank you, Shaquille. Let's just kick. I'm back now. So let's go to Sasha Starr first, and then I want to get everyone's opinion. You know, the idea here is it should we be focusing on the unvaccinated around the world rather than booster shots for those who have already gotten the vaccine? Because as I said, this Delta variant this COVID pandemic has become a hydra. Cut off one head and two heads come in its place. So we know that more variants
respond to that. What's the answer? If you want to focus on the unvaccinated, how? Do you want the taxpayers of wealthy countries to pay for it? Is that the suggestion?
I think we have to do that. I mean, I think we give more. We humanitarian efforts. We have millions of we have millions of doses of vaccines that are being thrown away in the United States. We could ship those vaccines to countries that need it. Sasha, let's start with Sasha. Sasha, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you. You have so many issues presented so far. They're all tied together in a way, but they're all different. I mean, what you do with the excess of vaccines available in the United States. So you propose that there could be shipped to some poorer countries around the world. Yes, of course, why not? But I'm not sure if all the sepsis vaccines are covering those who are still not vaccinated, and what's happened if they will change their mind, or most likely those who will stay alive, they will change their mind and decided that, yes, we would like to stay alive, and maybe we'll decide to take vaccines. On the other hand, the vaccines already been shipped to other countries, so there will be no vaccines for those who change their mind. But okay, listen. We don't live in a perfect world. Something has to be compromised. Now, regarding Pfizer, I don't think I can be objective because I happen to have a substantial holdings in Pfizer, and of course, if they can maximize their profits, I'm 100% for it. Let's just go and do it.
Mark Lee, what are your thoughts on that before we get to Nick P.O.D? Sasha, thank you.
No, I mean, definitely, I think that you brought up a couple of very interesting issues and all of that. One of them being that, yes, we should be sharing the doses that we have overseas, particularly if those countries don't have it already. And there's been a couple of articles that have talked about the fact that in the United States, have already shipped well over 100 million doses. I want to say it's close to maybe 110 or something like that doses around the world to places that don't have as much access. So definitely we should see it as one of our roles to definitely get out there and make sure that countries that are having a hard time getting those doses are able to do that. So I definitely think that the humanitarian efforts are very much needed and that they should be encouraged. I know that President Biden recently had mentioned the fact that his administration had shipped already to 65 countries, and it's definitely working to share supplies with the rest of the world. But of course, that also deals with the fact that then they deal with regulatory and other kind of setbacks. And, Shaquille was talking about the industries that are out there and all of that. And one of those industries that is very much of a strong lobby is the pharmaceutical industry. So I'm sure that there might even be some pushback on their part as well in terms of what they're willing to send to other countries, because at the end of the day, and as Nick knows, a lot of these companies are very much about the profit. It's not necessarily about what they're trying to do to save the world and things of that nature. They're trying to figure out how they can make a profit and make some money, because that's just the nature of what this kind of society is. A lot of these companies are very much powerful. And if I understand it, and Nick can correct me if I'm wrong, since he has that legal background, I want to say that for decades, and I actually worked briefly in a mailroom kind of setting at one of those companies, and that was years ago. But I worked for what is now GlaxoSmithKline. You know, it was Glaxo at the time, but I was working there. So I have a little bit of an understanding of how the pharmaceutical industry works and all of that. And it always seemed to me that it was one of the top three lobbies that were out there: the gun lobby, the pharmaceutical lobby, and there are probably one or two others, but I'm pretty sure that it is in one of the top three lobbies that exist. And we know the impact that lobbies can have on our political landscape. So I'm going to toss it to Nick and ask him, am I correct when I am thinking that the pharmaceutical lobby is one of our most powerful lobbies that exist? We don't hear you, Nick. We don't hear you. I don't know what's going on with your computer, but we don't hear.
I muted myself
Okay.
so that I would be quiet. Unlike Shaquille, who doesn't mute himself, I mute myself so I'd be quiet. Okay. I'm with Sasha. I'm stock in Pfizer. But part of the reason I have stock in Pfizer, I thought they're going to be the winners out of the game, and you bet on the winning horse, or a horse that it's just like in the chess, you'd bet on Magnus Carlsen to win, except for the other day where he lost. Okay, to do it, Dada, gosh knows how that happened. But you know, when you're out there betting on corporations, bet on the winners, because they'll generally become the winners again. The losers won't. So I invested in Pfizer, and I think it's a good company. I think their idea of a booster is also a good idea. And yes, I'm going to take their booster. Now, in terms of the other countries, because we are now beaming into Australia. When I go backstage, I send this out to 384 different groups. One I sent was Australia Startups, but I know the guy who runs it, Willie Hill, and they'll probably let us go on, even though what do we have to do with startups? We're World Edition. But let's go take a look at Australia. Okay, the failed state. All right. Since Shaquille's not here to defend himself, I can attack mercilessly and not have things come back. It's not the United States' responsibility to take care of the vaccines of other countries. It's their responsibility. That's the reason there are other countries out there. Now, yes, we have extra vaccines because our people aren't bright enough to take it and they're going to rot. Yeah, we'll send it out to the other countries. Why not? Because it's just going to rot anyway. But the primary responsibility of the United States of America and their sovereign nation is to take care of the people of the United States of America, not the rest of the world. So we're number one, and then they're all number two or three. Now, I'm surprised, though, that Steve started his monologue with a booster shot. I thought, wow, our rating's going to plummet down to and not Cuomo's sexual harassment. You're on mute, Steve. Okay.
I'm bringing that up. I mean, I was going to close out on that today, but yeah, we could talk
really
about that.
The booster shot gets you level A. Okay. I mean, booster shot's okay to discuss. Okay. And other countries not getting the COVID-19 vaccine, all the craziness. But what is more hot or juicier? It was front page of the Wall Street Journal. Cuomo asked to resign. I mean, that's hot. The other part happened to deal. We'll go over at Economics Monday. Two of our people on Economics Monday went to the University of Miami Law School. We made number one page on the Wall Street Journal, the amount of debt that the students get into on the Wall Street Journal. Okay, so he's back to defend the argument here that everybody
Nick,
has.
I have one question for you.
The failed state. We can't
why Canada, which is probably just as prosperous as Australia, could get incredible supply of Pfizer vaccine. It's available everywhere. Just any idiot can walk in the clinic without even documents, without anything, and say, "I want my vaccine." Okay, here's your vaccine. Yeah. Just get lost. So why Australia just couldn't reserve?
I just put the answer on the boards for people. Look, Australia's a failed state. I can't do anything about it. It's not our responsibility that they're in complete shambles over there. They locked down their country. That was good. Then, they forgot about the fact they need to buy a vaccine, and they may be just too bloody cheap, like the Japanese. Look, that's not our problem. That's their problem. They get to deal with it down under, mate. We don't get to deal with it. It's their problem over there.
Yeah,
Hey,
no
Nick, speaking of Wall Street Journal articles and everything, did you know that inflation is hitting a major industry that goes on? You know, I'm probably much too old to have one of these young things, but Shaquille is not. But apparently, the Wall Street Journal brought up that inflation is actually hitting the diaper industry because apparently that price has risen nearly 12% in the last year, and companies say that they're planning to hike up prices even more. And part of the reason is because oil and lumber costs are contributing to even more expensive disposable versions of that very necessary thing for young mothers and young dads. So
I can see Shaquille is totally concerned about the diaper industry, like most Australians, because they'll need it after their economy tanks.
I don't really see the point you're making. Inflation affects all goods and services. So, Nick, the point that you just made about Australia screwing this up, unlike you people who feel as though, depending on the political party that is in charge of government at the time, you can't criticize anything. Oh, Biden did an amazing job of every single thing he's ever done, right?
Oh, he's awesome.
Our conservative prime minister in this country has screwed up. And every Australian knows it, and he cops heat for it all the time. He screwed up by not ordering the Pfizer vaccine and deciding that we would make AstraZeneca under license here. And then because of blood clotting issues, Australians were advised by various health people not to take it if you're under 60, which puts us behind the schedule for Pfizer, and we have to wait in the queue like everybody else. But the point was, it negates the argument that Steve made, which is that Pfizer is only trying to prioritize wealthy countries and not prioritize other countries on a money basis. But I still am fascinated by the idea that the taxpayers of wealthy countries are going to need to pay for the vaccine for poorer countries. We don't do that already with other things. People in poor countries have already got terrible healthcare outcomes. Some countries have life expectancies of 45 and 50 years of age. At the moment, we throw away something like a third of the food that is grown in this country or produced in the world, I should say, this country, is thrown away while we have some 800 million people who are malnourished and don't have enough to eat. It would make sense that we say, instead of us throwing some of this food away, that we ship it to those countries, but we don't. And to try and make it a tax issue, it's not. It's a political issue, and it's because nobody cares about poor people. It's terrible. So, I don't think we should be now guilt tripping, Germany and saying, well, how could you possibly give your people a third dose when there's all these people that don't have access to the vaccine right now? That's just ridiculous.
Well, Shaquille, first off, before the COVID started and everything, there were definitely a lot of programs that were actually talking about doing what you are exactly saying we should do, because I know of at least one program that existed in the NFL, because, a lot of people attend these games and they definitely get a lot of food and things of that nature. So there were whole programs that were being designed to get some of that wasteful food into the poor people around America.
Mark, I'm not talking about a charitable program. What Steve is talking about is a government program that requires the taxpayer of one country to provide something to the residents of another country, and I'm saying that's not.
But here's my jab at that before we get into Governor Cuomo and talk about some other things. But here's the deal. I mean, look, I believe that we are in a war right now against this COVID-19. Okay, and if we don't
that's the worst thing we could be at, because you lose every war you have. You have the war against drugs, the war against poverty, the war against,
But your argument doesn't make sense. I mean, yes, it's taxpayer funded, but if the goal is to rid the world of this virus and get rid of the Delta variant, it makes more sense to put the vaccines in the hands of those who haven't had a vaccine than provide additional shots to those who may get sick, but we know that the likelihood is that they're not going to die, right? And so do we want to save lives? Now, look, the richer countries, we're allies. We can work together to provide the vaccines to people in Nepal, people in India, people in Nigeria, people in Africa. That's what we do.
Hang on a second. Firstly, we don't know that these people who are already vaccinated are going to continue to have protection against the virus, not just because of the mutations, but also on the variants, but also because we don't actually know how long the vaccine will be safe. Will last for. Pfizer and Moderna are suggesting that it may only last 6 months, so we don't know that. But let's just say that what you said was correct. what exactly would you propose? Would you propose there being an international treaty that says to countries, you're not allowed to give your citizens a third dose until everybody in the world has had the first and second dose? Is that the proposal? How would you enforce something like that?
I don't know how we would enforce it. I'm just look. This is uncharted territory for me.
Well,
I'm
it's
just
not
saying
uncharted
that. No, I mean,
territory.
look. When I mean, look. Okay, let's use. I forget the taxpayer thing, and I want Sasha Starr to jump in here.
Forget about
But look at
taxpaying.
this.
What you're suggesting is I can't have my health care because somebody else can't have it.
That's a very inward focused kind of nationalistic sentiment. I mean, I'm going to start with Sasha Starr. What if during World War II, we had said, okay, forget it. The Jewish people are being exterminated. Let Hitler do his thing. I'm just going to worry about our country. We came together. We did it. We came together with the Allies, and we defeated Hitler. We defeated fascism. And together we can defeat this pandemic. This is war. And we need to. We are democracies.
If you got to take from these greedy, rich capitalists,
America said they were staying out of conflicts in Europe. They did not enter World War II in Europe until America started having issue with the Japanese and other issues. They wanted to stay far out of that, and then finally they came in and did something about it. So don't start just suggesting that America was there the whole time and just
not America, but Britain was there. We
of course, Britain was there. Britain's right next to Germany.
Britain, the Allies.
Yeah,
right.
We saved the world for democracy.
Sasha Starr, what is your take on this issue before we get to
the world?
We got to talk about sex and scandal on the show today, but Sasha, what's your take on this?
Okay, so you started to develop the concept of war. Okay, let's talk about war. First of all, when you say that we saved the Jews from being exterminated, that's not true. Absolutely not true. In fact, there were ships even before the start of the war that were with hundreds of Jews who were trying to escape Germany, and they were trying to land in Canada, in the United States, everywhere. They were turned away, and they had to come back to Germany, and all of them probably died. The Jews were exterminated severely in the last 2 years of war, second half of 43 to January 45. And all allies knew about that very well, but they had other plans and other strategic points to make, and they were the last concentration camp was still working in January in 1945. Now, talking about the war. In a war, if you have traitors, you kill them. Now, if it's not a war, then you have a tribunal, you have trials, you have something like during the wartime, you just kill them. So what's happened if you, to win the war, you're vaccinating people, and those who are unwilling to go through vaccinations, they're nothing more than traitors. They endanger themselves, first of all, but also other people who are vaccinated. So
they want to kill them the same time.
And if that's a war, then you just kill them. I don't know whether through hanging or guillotine or a fire squad. I mean, there has to be decided.
So you want to kill them in order to save their life.
Absolutely, and that would help those who are vaccinated to be alive without worrying to get virus from unvaccinated idiots. So I would think that that's what has to be done.
Well, Sasha's. I just want to make it a crime and get him with a $4,000 fine, like they do in Australia. Okay, but Sasha just moved the meter a little further. He goes, okay, you don't take the vaccine, no problem. Here's the guillotine, baby. Here's some Russian justice. Here's the.
I mean, Sasha, surely, you know when an animal escapes from the zoo and they have those guns that like tranquilizer guns, and they shoot those needles into them. I mean, surely you could just employ the National Guard to run around the Republican states, and anyone who's not vaccinated just gets shot with a vaccine gun or something. Yeah, that would be a better alternative.
It's not Republican.
Chopping their heads off.
It doesn't matter. You don't take the vaccine. Okay, here's your choice. We start off. See, I'd be a little more humane than Sasha. I'd start off with making a criminal offense and a fine. then you jab them, then you move to the Sasha level, coming from the Russian background that he has. Here's the guillotine, the gulag,
Yeah.
and it's over with. I mean,
So we're gonna guillotine folks and everything.
You big government-loving people, you hate the idea that a person will make a choice for themselves.
You create concentration camps where you put all people who are unwilling to be vaccinated. You just put them there, so they can only infect those who are with them in those camps, but they're completely isolated from polluting the air and getting vaccinated people.
So we're using
So what would you do? What would you do about
that?
what would you do amongst the vaccinated when you have a breakthrough virus and you need a booster shot? Would you then say that anybody who hasn't had the booster shot because they don't have access to it or whatever, they're going to also be added to the concentration camp with the unvaccinated?
Well, I think that's what's going to happen. If you had your 2 shots and 6 months pass by, I think you will be required to get a booster shot. And in New York, by the way,
you have access to it.
Experts.
YouTube, Sasha and Shaquille, just really quickly, hold on a second. One of the things I was going to ask you, if I'm hearing you correctly, so we're going to do an internment camp for those that are unvaccinated. So we're going to start this concept of an internment camp, and we know how well that worked for the Japanese and everything. So I'm not sure that I'm quite buying this, but I did have a question really quickly for Steve, because since we're looking at different articles around the world and everything, and apparently, in that paper that Steve thinks is a bastion of liberalism, I don't know that I necessarily agree with his opinion of that, but in the New York Times, there was an article saying that Biden's honeymoon is over, and part of it is because they're looking at different things that are happening in America, like the rate of inflation going from 1.4% in January to 5.4% in June, the number of homicides going from 25% in 2019 and 2020 to 2021 rate of 6.2 homicides per 100,000 residents, which is on track to become the highest recorded in the United States in more than 20 years, and the number of illegal border crossings that have more than doubled during Biden's 7 months in office, raising the potential for immigration to become a central issue within the campaign and everything. So, Steve, as a Democrat, do we feel that Biden is in trouble? And do we feel that other Democrats are in trouble? And is this whole scandal stuff going on, whether it's Gavin Newsom in California or Cuomo in New York, adding to this?
We're going to talk about Governor Cuomo in a minute. But I mean, I think first of all, I will say that there's two separate plots going on here, so to speak. I think that the first is and quit smiling, Shaquille. Would you mute him, by the way? We're going to start jabbing you. But I think from a vaccination situation in terms of getting the American people healthier and reducing the rates of infection, this president has been successful. I do believe that he gets a B plus in terms of coming in the middle of a pandemic. Now, I will give President Trump credit for the Operation Warp Speed and getting the vaccine produced with these emergency authorizations, which happened on his watch. But President Biden came in, was quickly able to get distribution set up, get vaccinations increased in America, getting all of that thing. He's also had success with stimulus packages, relief checks, getting our economy moving again. But I think the next test is the foreign policy part. The border, flood to the border. He's not been successful on that. I don't think Vice President Harris has done a good job managing that situation. We do have potential inflation coming, economic challenges. We also are seeing a lack of a clearly defined foreign policy. What are we doing with China? What are we doing with Russia? What are we doing now on his watch? You've got assassinations in Haiti. You have protests in Cuba. You have now Tunisia, democracy breaking in all these different nations, right? And so I think from that perspective, this president could be now heading into a uncharted territory. And I think the test will be the midterm elections, 2022. Will, for example, the Trump-based candidate win the primary in North Carolina to be our next United States senator? That's a big test. We're seeing Trump-backed opponents winning primaries in Ohio recently, right? And so if that's a litmus test, that could be bad news for Joe Biden. Of course, it all determines on the economy. So I'm going to leave it to Shaquille. I know Shaquille's laughing, but I think if we had reelected Donald Trump, and I know Sasha Starr agrees with me, we would be at 14% vaccination. We probably have 700,000 Americans dead. Right?
Okay, well let's okay.
I
So
mean-
let's talk. Let's be realistic here. So I've got the great. I've got the great position of not being a partisan, right? So I don't have to suck up and brown nose any
How
of
about
these.
brown nosing? I'm stating the
right?
facts. 600,000 people died under this president's watch. Under Joe Biden.
Well, okay. So who was the president after World War II? Because what an amazing accomplishment that that the person didn't have as many Americans die. Look, I don't actually give, and I've said this before on the show, I don't give really an awful lot of credit to Donald Trump for warp speed. Okay. Why? Because is the suggestion that any other president would have done anything else but give an executive order to fund that? Of course not. Any president in that position would have done the same thing. For the same reasons, I'm not giving any credit to Joe Biden for, look how many people I got vaccinated. I wouldn't have been, Trump would never have been able to do that. And if Trump wasn't able to do that, would that have had anything to do with the incessant, anti-vaccine comments being made by prominent Democrats about not trusting anything that was developed under Donald Trump? But, as soon as Joe Biden comes in, then all of a sudden it's only Republicans that would say things like that. Okay. I just find that the politicians are doing this all the time. They'll say something, we want to defund the police. Then when it backfires on them, we never said that. It was the Republicans that said that. You want to have open borders, and then when it doesn't work, well, it was actually the Republicans, they didn't fund this, they didn't fund that. I mean, stop it, enough. People don't believe that. Okay, so, if the Democrats care, and I think they should, if the Democrats care about, furthering the interests of the United States and the people that are in it, stop with the partisanship. Stop with we're just going to do the opposite of what the Republicans want to do. And I'm going to say the same thing to Republicans. If the Republicans care about the country and its future, stop trying to just one-up the Democrats and just do the opposite of whatever the Democrats want to do. It doesn't work. It's divisive, and it doesn't further the national interests of your country. I say the same thing in my own country. This kind of partisanship and this kind of dishonesty in politics, we want to have infrastructure. Great. Let's use infrastructure to build funding for childcare. It's not infrastructure. It's something else. Stop lying about it. Do you know what I mean? And this kind of nonsense, it just breeds mistrust, people mistrusting government, and then you want to try and use force against those people that have questions about how government's
so anyway, we're having philosophical debates here about Biden's success and non-success, but I do agree with Shaquille Adams' point of the fact that it's become extremely partisan. It's a zero-sum game, but
what has Biden been successful at? Let's take the vaccine out. Name his successes. What has he done since he's been there? And I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. In the lead up to the election, I kept asking on this show and on other shows on IBM TV, what are Biden's policies? What are Biden's policies? And nobody could tell me any of his policies.
But okay,
now, what has he actually done since he's been
there? Before I answer that question, I want to be respectful to Sasha Starr, who's being with us. So, Sasha, could you answer that question or at least take it a shot?
Okay, first of all, if you're talking about the foreign politics of Biden, he's inherited complete mess in that department, and it is absolutely unclear, really, what he's going to do about it. It's a very, very difficult situation. He proceeded to remove his troops from Afghanistan, and now, there is a large question, even larger than that, is what to do with American jobs at home, which are producing the military equipment and arms. And there are pockets of that if America will start to sort of becoming more realistic and replace the 70 years old military systems, like intercontinental rockets and all this nuclear garbage with modern ways of warfare, then a lot of American jobs will be lost. And, the senators from the states like Ohio, for example, they will be fighting for these jobs to remain, even if they are obsolete and not productive anymore, but they will try to keep these jobs, to keep these communities alive. So although America is withdrawing from the world as a military power, the expenses are still there and piling up. And how to navigate all that and do coherent foreign policy, it's absolutely unclear to me. I really don't have an answer.
Yeah, I mean, well, anyway, thank you so much,
Hey,
Sasha. Before Mark Lee goes, let me answer the question real quickly, Mark, if that's okay, from Sasha, and then we'll get into other. We need to talk about Governor Cuomo, in terms of what's going on with that. We want to talk about some of the Olympics. We only got 20 minutes left, but let me answer the question, Shaquille. So, I believe that this president inherited, as Sasha Starr said, an absolute mess. There were, when he became the president, 500,000 Americans dying from a virus. When we had a president who was saying use hydrochloroquine or Clorox or bleach to get rid of this pandemic, he said it would go away in Easter time.
Take that out of context, and
No, but he said it would go away. It would just vanish, and it didn't. So President Biden was successful as the leader of this nation to put together strategies of getting he started relying on the science and the data to make sure that we had a vaccination strategy, and he was able to increase it to now about 60% of the population vaccinated against a virus that if you will be hospitalized or you will die. So he did succeed on that. I agree he succeeded on addressing climate change by getting back in the Paris Accords. He was initiating ourselves back with relationships with NATO and other countries. As Sasha Starr has said, our foreign policy under Trump was a disaster. What foreign policy did we have?
But I don't agree with
you.
He
broke every agreement this nation ever entered into.
Hold on 1 second before
asking NATO to pay.
Hold on a second before Shaquille gets to his point and everything. One of the things I was going to add, and this may shock Shaquille and everything, but I actually get tired sometimes of the sloganism that exists in the United States and even in the Western world. I think that's part of what got the defund the police movement in trouble, was that they came up with this slogan, which is actually not what, as Shaquille has argued, people that are involved in that, the majority of them, I'm not going to say all of them, but the majority of them just want accountability by the police. So I think that was one of the worst cases of sloganism that ever existed, and it was a misnomer of a name. They should have come up with a better name and everything, but that's just my opinions on how that worked. And the other thing, even with Biden, I have actually had a couple of moments where I have scratched my head going like, wait a minute. So even when we talk about the whole thing that he's talking about with evictions, and you're telling folks that it's got to come back to the states and it's got to come back to the CDC, and that your hands are tied and you're supposed to be the leader of the free world, that had me scratching my head. I'm going like, wait a minute. And I was a person that voted for Biden. And I'm actually, like I've said before, yes, I'm a Democrat and things of that nature. But I'm not a Democrat that is going to be just Pollyanna about what's going on. And I literally was scratching my head when I'm hearing our president saying that, look, I'm just going to pass it off to the other people. I don't want to deal with it. I'm going to pass it off to somebody else. And I didn't think that that was a fair thing for us to be doing in that sense. I'm not saying that the states can't be involved. I'm not saying that the cities can't be involved, but I thought that he should have had a stronger stance in what we're going to do and how we're going to handle the situation.
You know, if Biden does something that is, very similar to something that Trump did, it was absolutely racist and horrible and terrible when Trump did it, and it's absolutely perfect when Biden did it because he's the best president ever lived, and everything that he did is the best president ever had.
This is the president. Okay, I mean, we could go on and on, but we got to spend some time on Cuomo. But the fact of the matter is that, yes, President Trump did have I believe, good intentions when he came in the White House. He wanted to make America great again. He was addressing the fact of putting jobs back for these rural areas of America, the white collar workers. But, the thing is, when you're the president of the United States and you have white supremacists carrying torches and Ku Klux Klan, and he said he didn't call them out on it as the president of the United States. He said, I'm not saying that. But why, if you're the president of the United States and people are coming with torches saying, I'm the cake, we need, whatever racist things. He said there were good people on both sides. What is good about white supremacy?
Again, you like to cherry pick things out. There's nothing good about white supremacy.
I'm not cherry picking things. He was the president of the United States.
It's like confusing it. Look, again, again, Trump's not the president anymore. If you're going to criticize everything that Trump did, why isn't there being equal criticism for the things that Biden has done or some of his policies that haven't worked? But there's not. And that's the point that I'm making. If you want to have an accountable government that is in touch with the people, any political leader, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, need to be criticized. The things that they put out there as being ideas need to be examined. There needs to be debate. You can't just shut down half the country and say, all of you are racist because Donald Trump did this or that. And so therefore, by default, our candidate is the best that ever lived.
No, and Shaquille, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you on a lot of what your stance is in terms of the dialogue and everything. I was actually privileged to be, and I only made like 1 or 2 comments in this, but I've talked about this app that's out there and everything. It's a very popular app called Clubhouse and everything. And I was actually on a room yesterday. It was actually an interesting discussion. It was called, I'm trying to think of the title of the room, but it was "Do Immigrants Work Harder Than Americans?" Meaning the Americans that were born here and everything. And we got into a discussion about everything from education to the whole impact that immigrants have had on our society. Because one of the gentlemen brought up the fact that most immigrants come here and they spend a lot of money going to colleges, more money than even our college kids do, because they're coming from other parts. So he brought up the notion of how much money is brought into the American economy because of immigrants coming here to the United States. And he also brought up the fact that many of these people, there's a misnomer or a misconception that a lot of these people come from, say, Canada or Afghanistan or Russia or whatever, and they literally leave the country. And as he pointed out, and he had some statistics to back it up, most of them actually wind up staying here. So they actually do a lot in terms of bringing very powerful economic engines into our country. And they definitely have a lot of people that are now second and third generation. I believe that if I'm correct, and Steve can correct me if I'm wrong, Steve is a second generation American and everything in terms of being here from part of India and all of that.
First generation.
Okay, like I said, yeah. I knew you would correct me if I was wrong and everything, but definitely we're seeing more and more of that happening. And that was part of the things they brought up. And yes, they brought up one of Nick's favorite topics as well, which is the state of our education system, which is definitely not the greatest in America and could be doing a lot better. I know that one of Nick's favorite sayings, which I've actually brought up in some of the interviews that I've done with some of our past guests, is that we are in the 21st century, but have 18th century values and all of that. So I know that that's one of Nick's favorite sayings, and I actually agree with him. And that's some of what they were talking about. But they also talked about how it has impacted certain neighborhoods, because certain neighborhoods will see immigrants either being isolationists, meaning that they are, because they're coming into a new country, staying in a kind of bonded unit or staying together and everything. And that sometimes throws off the people that are here in America, because they're not always used to that, even though some of the historical African-American communities did the same thing. Black Wall Street was an example of that, and definitely that happened. But then they also see people that are setting up stores. And what one of the gentlemen brought up is, hey, some of these people were doing that same kind of store in the country that they came from, but they're setting them up in predominantly minority communities. Like if you look at the gas stations, if you look at some of the convenience stores, a lot of times they are run by folks from the Middle East or Asia and other communities. And that sometimes throws a kind of conversation about the racial divide into the thing as well. So I've gotten off my soapbox and talked about a couple of things, but that's just some of the things I was going to add.
We're going to continue this debate. As I said, for those of you listening, this is healthy dialogue between Shaquille Louderman and I. We are actually friends, but we are jabbing today. This is great, ready to rumble. We're going to come back. I give Biden a B+. I do think that the future of his re-elections and his presidency is not certain. And I think clearly if the economy turns south, if he does not have a clearly defined foreign policy, which the Democrats typically have been weaker on foreign policy, I do think this president could be vulnerable, whether he runs again for re-election or whether Kamala Harris runs as the nominee of the party. Who the Republicans will position to run for the presidency is yet to be determined. So I think it's fair game. But typically presidents are re-elected based on the economy. So I think if the economy is bad in a year and a half from now, I think it'll be hard for Joe Biden to be reelected. We'll see. But it also depends on whether the pandemic is here still. But with that being said, let's get to Governor Cuomo. 11 accusations of sexual harassment. President Biden asking him to resign. The Speaker of the New York Assembly is now also saying that he needs to go. He says that he's being victim of he just hugs and kisses people all the time. What do you think, guys? Should this guy go or not? Shaquille?
He gets no sympathy from me at all because he was one of those people that said, especially if it was a Republican being accused, absolutely, they've got to resign, they've got to go, blah, blah, blah. Of course, what happens to him is a Democrat, so different rules apply. I'm going to stand by what I've always said on this issue. Until a person is actually convicted in a court of law, they should be entitled to the presumption of innocence. Yes, there's been an investigation by the AG of New York, and the investigation has come up with these findings, but he hasn't been convicted in a court of law, so he is entitled until that time to his presumption of innocence.
No, I don't agree with you. Definitely entitled to that presumption of innocence. I've actually seen this kind of incident happen and impact people even here in North Carolina. If you look on your Facebook, you'll see that I am friends with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Gatewood, and Mr. Gatewood was accused of similar kind of things, and there was actually some political kind of things that were going on, and maybe even some one-upmanship because he was involved in NAACP leadership at the time, and definitely, even though we have a great person in the other side that was actually not coming to his aid, being Reverend Barber and everything, there was no proof at all that it actually happened. So definitely there's been no proof. So he's still being continued to be a leader in the community and still being very active, even in some of the things that have been going on with police situations and all of that. So I'm not going to say until I hear concrete proof that it has happened, that it is a case of we have to believe the person that is making the accusations when we haven't heard all of the story yet. And definitely, I think that we need to have the complete story. But if he's guilty, then he definitely should go. Because like I said, I'm not one to tolerate women being abused, but I do believe that we need to hear the entire story and hear what the truth is, or as much of the truth as we can find out.
Yeah, I agree, and I think as a father of a daughter, and the more as I always get worried about women coming out. Why would they come out? I mean, it's not easy for them. So I tend to believe women more when they do come out. So I don't think we can poo-poo it and throw it under the rug. But I do think the investigation needs to continue, and until he is actually convicted of a crime or they show, we have to presume innocence. But I think it is. I think his credibility is in question at this point. But 11 people have come forward. It might really be in his best interest just to step down. I think he just needs to think about
11 people have come forward, but I haven't read the whole report, but some of it's like, well, he gave me a kiss on the cheek in the middle of a crowded room. Well, I think it's harassment. I mean, if you're going to have people running around with this hypersensitivity, like somebody says, oh, hey, that's a really nice dress you're wearing. Oh my God, he harassed me. We need to know exactly what sort of harassment we're talking about.
Even as an elected official, I've had to go through. I mean, first of all, I'm a happily married man to my college sweetheart. I've been married almost 30 years, but I'm very respectful of women. But I don't go out with a woman alone anymore unless there's someone accompanied. We've all had to go under microaggression training.
What's a microaggression?
Well, but for example, I'm not Shaquille. I'm just stating a point. It's a different time we live in.
But it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be a different time.
I know, but it's.
We have.
Shaquille, you'll need a little microaggressive training when you get over here.
I mean, anyway, Sasha, you've been quiet. What are your thoughts about Governor Cuomo? Do you not really know? You're from Canada.
I'm disappointed with what Shaquille and Mark said, to wait until proven guilty. He is not an assembly line worker. He is in one of the highest offices in the country. He's a governor of state of New York, right? And if he lost the trust based on the Attorney General report, and it's obvious, how he can stay, let's see, to get it all to a court, to a trial, it will take two years, maybe much more than that. So how he can govern without any trust, without all this heavy charges around him. He's just becoming impediment on democratic institution and has to go just now. I mean, he is not a destitute man by all means, so he can find some kind of occupation for himself, or maybe retire altogether, or so on. But he cannot stay in the office under the circumstances.
Well, I totally disagree.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, I
I'm
think
gonna-
only
I'm
time
gonna
will tell.
tell-
Now,
I'm gonna
other
tell
news
you
going
why,
on. We
though.
want to congratulate Simone Biles for winning bronze. We want to congratulate all of the different Olympic winners. I don't know if there's any big news. I know U.S. volleyball, beach volleyball, will be in the semifinals. Lots of really great track stuff going on. Gabby Jones getting on the medal stand, and I don't know. I'm probably missing out a few. But any great news? I know Australia's won some golds. Where are we on the medal? And then once again, we talked about it yesterday. Kudos to Canada beating the U.S. women's soccer. That was a big win for Canada, Sasha. And we know that.
In my opinion, it's a horrible story. Although I'm cheering for Canadian team, and I really hope they will get gold medals. But that particular game, I saw it, and I saw this penalty awarded to Canada for absolutely nothing. There were no danger of scoring a goal. It was absolutely incredible decision in such an important match with 15 some minutes left to play, and obviously that was an execution of American team by the referee, and I hope she will rot in hell.
Well, and Megan Rapinoe seems so bitter. I appreciated her comments, but I feel like she might have wanted to take a little break because she said, "Well, we never lose to Canada." I felt that was a bit arrogant, and that was just my personal opinion.
When has she been anything other than bitter and arrogant? Which is bitter and arrogant about being an American in the first place.
Yeah, very bitter, very. And I think my thing is, I think if she focused more time on leading the team rather than yelling at everyone and screaming at everyone, maybe they would have won. So I know I'm taking a lot of shots.
They couldn't even beat a bunch of 15-year-old high school kids.
Yeah, I know. Anyway,
to get a gold medal.
Any other? So President Biden is now asking for looking maybe at a slight extension of the moratorium on rent. So that's something we're going to talk about tomorrow. People being evicted, it's lots going on, and looking at Tunisia, Haiti, these democratic countries. I don't know if I'm missing any big news.
Well, in terms of the Olympics, I just wanted to shout out Sydney McLaughlin, who definitely did a great job of setting that world record, and definitely did an amazing job. And the U.S. finished 1-2 in that race, and it seems like they just go back and forth between her and Miss Muhammad, who was the previous gold medal, the previous winner, and also a previous record holder. So it seems like in that particular race, they go back and forth. I'm still trying to figure out how the U.S. is going to break the stranglehold of diving that apparently China has, because China does not seem to lose in that sport. There are other sports that don't seem to lose in as well. There are other places that have great diving teams, but that Chinese team seems to be very much a powerhouse in all of that.
You know why? Because China sportsmen don't quit like some US sportsmen. They are competing. They are sent by their country to compete, and they do compete the best possible way. In US, it's a different story. There are some sportsmen who just quit because they don't feel well, because they have some problems, because whatever. And then all of a sudden, they're coming back and they do compete. So try to figure out.
But on the bad side of China, and I know that definitely Steve has got to get to the final jab that he gives at the end and all of that. But, there is a lot of belief, and I'm not saying that it was necessarily true, and it depends on what people's attitudes were about Trump when the pandemic first happened and everything, about China being the quote unquote epicenter of the pandemic and maybe even the starting point of the pandemic and all of that. But now they are grappling with a new outbreak. So is there any fear that we have that this pandemic might be going into not just the second year, which we already are in, but possibly even a third or fourth or fifth year, because China is now grappling with a new outbreak that is definitely devastating that large country. So could that outbreak also spread to the rest of the world as well.
I just hope that the blue outbreak that's happened to the United States doesn't spread to the rest of the world. Had to get that in there before you have your final jab, Steve.
Well, we've been jabbing so much. We're going to close out today. My final jab is really first a final reflection. I mean, as we talk and debate the United States policies, we often forget that the words of our Constitution are we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. I think the founders of our nation realized that the union wasn't perfect. In fact, it was far from perfect. And it takes us on both sides of the aisle, listening to each other, disagreeing. And that may be one of the greatest things of American democracy, that we encourage this healthy debate. As Shaquille Latimer has said, and he and I don't agree on many things politically, we need Democrats out there so that Republicans have policies they can argue for. We need Republicans out there. The Democrats can say, look, I don't agree with that. And you can't have one or the other. And it's going to take healthy debate to continue to move forward. In my opinion, though, I do believe that in many ways, this pandemic has clearly defined the differences of our political parties and our political system. I do stand by President Biden in that I think he has successfully gotten our nation vaccinated. He inherited a mess as our commander-in-chief, and he is flying the plane in a very turbulent time, a stormy time where over 650,000 Americans have died, millions and millions of cases around the world. And this is a president that's got to get our country healthy. Once he gets the country healthy, then he has to turn to the economy. And he has to turn to the strength in our world. Only time will tell. But I do think it's clear that Republican-led states are pushing against the vaccination of the American people, like in Ohio, like in Florida, against vaccine mandates. I know the Republicans say that freedom, we don't want people intervening with our health care, but at the end of the day, we can't have life. We can't have liberty. We cannot pursue happiness if we are not alive. And I agree, President Biden is working to make sure the American people are alive and well. That's my last jab. Keep up the good work, President Biden. We're going to wish you well in the next couple of years. And we look forward to more healthy debate as we develop a more perfect union. Thank you. That's my last jab. We'll be back tomorrow for another edition of World Edition.